in the dictation of March the 5th, 1944, which is contained in Maria Valtorta's notebooks of 1944. 3 volumes, as I said before, one for 1943 and another for the years 1945 to 1950, which are all translated into English, fortunately. Jesus talks on March the 5th about the Garden of Eden, our first parents, the fall. I think his explanations of a few matters are very instructive. But the reason I particularly wanted to talk about them on this video is because there are those on the internet who are hostile to Maria Valtorta's writings. And one particular person commented on one of my videos, which was not to do with the Garden of Eden issue, but brought forward what I know on some websites, saying that that what Maria Valtorta is saying is that with her Jesus, that the original sin was sex or lust. Well, actually, in here we get to an understanding of what it actually is. But I really do invite critics of Maria Valtorta to comment on my videos, say what their objections are. Because I've around the block a few times reading these things, and so I anticipate being able to deal with many objections and misunderstandings. And if not, if there's a particular objection or misunderstanding that's new to me, and that no doubt will be, then I'll look into it and address it. But I really do invite comments of that sort to be made, and nobody should be shy of offending me if that were ever possible. If it were ever possible to be shy of offending me. Unfortunately, it's possible to offend me because I'm human like everybody else. But I want to talk here about what Jesus says about original sin. I've said something else elsewhere, but just in this quote of March the 5th. And he does come back to the issue of Genesis quite a few times. And if I was to put them all together, we'd have a very long video. But I'll just deal with this particular moment. And it's not the whole of March the 5th's discussion by Jesus that I'm going to read. It's part of it, because it's not all directly about the Garden of Eden. Don't you read in Genesis that God made man the ruler over all that was on earth, that is, over everything except God and his angelic ministers? Don't you read that he made woman so that she will be man's companion in joy and in ruling over all the living? Don't you read that they could eat everything except from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Why? What underlying meaning is in the phrase, so that he will rule? And in the phrase, referring to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Have you ever wondered, you that wonder about so many useless things and are never able to ask your soul about the heavenly truths? And Jesus talks then about the soul and how we could talk to it and it would enlighten us. And he says, it, the soul, would tell you that God had prohibited the knowledge of good and evil because he had granted good to his creatures gratuitously. And he did not want you to know evil because it is a fruit sweet to the palate, which, however, on descending into the blood with its juice, brings about a fever which kills and produces parching thirst. And therefore, the more one drinks that deceitful juice, the thirstier one gets for it. You will object. And why did he place it there? Why? Because evil is a power which arose by itself, like certain monstrous maladies in the healthiest body. I'll just pause for a moment there. It might not be obvious why he's saying that in response to the question he posed, hypothetically. Why was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil placed in the Garden of Eden? Why not place it outside, away from Adam and Eve, so they could have not gone near it? And I get the impression, my understanding of Jesus' response is, when he says, evil arose by itself, like certain monstrous maladies in the healthiest body, it's like the desire, the option of doing evil is going to be there. And so God has to place that tree there so that to show that we will always have that choice. It's no use having a scenario where the tree is placed outside the Garden of Eden, because it would fail to represent the fact that we have a choice for evil. We have a choice to disobey God. And you still might say, well, the tree could be placed outside of Eden. It just could have been done at the beginning of the human race. But actually, the account of the Garden of Eden is not just a naturalistic recounting of an historical event. It's more than that. Jesus uses the term metaphor shortly. And then it becomes more clear why we have this tree in the garden, for the reasons I've said. But when I bring in the word metaphor, I could hear almost alarm bells going off. So we could be saying that we're evolved from monkeys, or monkey-like beings, monkey-like creatures. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I don't believe that. But just because we may deny evolution, and by the way, Jesus elsewhere speaks against Darwinism. So he's pretty clear that there's no evolution from apes or ape-like creatures, or anything less advanced than apes either. But still, once we've disposed of the theory of evolution, there's no reason to feel skittish about talking about metaphorical elements in the Genesis account. This has a long pedigree in Catholicism. St. Augustine, when he's looking at this in his own writings about Genesis, and they are quite substantive, he talks about when God says, let there be light. And Augustine says that may be when God created the angels, the light represents the creation of the angels. So there's much more to Genesis than simply the bare, plain reading of it. So I'll just continue, having allayed any suspicions that I might be trying to slip evolution in the back door here. Or even that the Jesus of Maria Valtorta might be trying to do that very thing. So just to go back to where I was before I engaged in that wide explanation. You will object, and why did he place it there, the tree of good and evil? Why? Because evil is a power which arose by itself, like certain monstrous maladies in the healthiest body. Lucifer was an angel, the most beautiful of angels, a perfect spirit, inferior to God alone. And yet, in his luminous being, a fume of haughtiness arose, which he did not disperse, but rather condensed by nourishing it. And from this incubation, evil was born. He existed before men did. God had hurled him down outside of paradise, the accursed incubator of evil, this contaminator of paradise. But he has remained the eternal incubator of evil, and, unable to contaminate paradise anymore, he has contaminated the earth. And there's a footnote here. Isaiah 14, 9 to 21. Jesus continues. That metaphorical plant is intended to demonstrate this truth. God had said to the man and the woman, "Know all the laws and mysteries of creation, but do not seek to usurp my right to be man's creator. My love, which will circulate in you, will suffice to propagate the human lineage, and without sensual lust, but by the pulsation of charity alone. It will bring forth the new Adams of the lineage. I give you everything. I reserve for myself only this mystery of the formation of man." Satan wanted to remove from man this intellectual virginity, and with his serpentine tongue, he flattered and caressed Eve's members and eyes, prompting reflexes and sensitivities which they formerly lacked, for malice had intoxicated them. She saw, and on seeing, she wanted to experience. The flesh was awakened. Oh, if only she'd called upon God. If she'd run to say, "Father, I am sick. The serpent caressed me, and disturbance is in me." The Father would have purified her and healed her with his breath. For as he had infused life into her, he could have infused innocence into her again, bringing her to forget the serpentine toxin, and indeed placing repugnance towards the serpent within her, as it is present in those whom a malady has assaulted, and who, when healed of that malady, bear an instinctive repugnance towards it. But Eve did not go to the Father. Eve went back to the serpent. That sensation was sweet to her. Quoting Genesis 3:6, "On seeing that the fruit of the tree was good to eat and lovely to look at and pleasing in appearance, she took it and ate it," Jesus says. And she understood. Malice had now descended to gnaw at her innards. She saw with new eyes and heard with new ears the habits and voices of the beasts. And she longed for them with a mad longing. She began sin by herself. She carried it out with her companion. That is why a greater condemnation weighs upon woman. And the footnote there is Genesis 3:14 to 19. And we can say that part of that is the pains in childbearing that women experience. Clearly, just as an aside from me, Jesus is not a feminist. Okay, so to continue the narrative. It is because of her, woman, that man has become rebellious towards God and has known lust and death. It is because of her that he has no longer been able to master his three realms of the spirit, for he allowed the spirit to disobey God, of the moral sphere, for he allowed the passions to rule over him, of the flesh, for he degraded it to the instinctive laws of the beasts. "The serpent seduced me," Eve said. The woman offered me the fruit and I ate it, Adam said. And since then, the threefold concupiscence has gripped the three realms of man. There is nothing but grace that can ease the grip of this pitiless monster. And if it is alive, thoroughly alive, maintained more and more alive by the will of the faithful Son, it comes to strangle the monster and to have nothing more to fear. Neither inner tyrants, that is the flesh and the passions, nor outer tyrants, that is the world and the powerful of the world, nor persecutions, nor death. It is as the Apostle Paul states, and they were quoting Acts 20:24, I fear none of these things, nor do I place any value on my own life, provided that I fulfill my mission and the ministry received from the Lord Jesus to bear witness to the gospel of God's grace.